The crunch of boots on gravel pierced the quiet morning as I knelt, hands buried in the rich soil, tending to my golden seal plants. The air smelled of earth and fresh greenery, the kind of peace I had worked hard to cultivate in my garden. These plants weren't just some hobby of mine. They were rare medicinal treasures. I'd spent years perfecting their growth, and this morning I was proud, until the ground beneath me vibrated with the sound of approaching footsteps. I looked up just in time to see Karen striding toward me, her sharp eyes fixed on the small patch of golden seal. She stopped a few feet away, hands on her hips, as she surveyed my work with a sneer. "You're breaking HOA rules," she spat, her voice cold and calculated. "Those aren't native plants. You need to pull them out or I'll report you. It's that simple." I stood up slowly, wiping the dirt from my hands, my heart racing. "You don't get to decide that," I replied, voice steady but strained. "These plants are mine." Karen's lips curled into a twisted smile. "They're not just yours, Jack. You've been warned. If I have to, I'll make sure you regret this." HOA's got eyes everywhere. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I knew this wasn't about plants anymore. It never was with her. I could feel it in my gut. This was the start of something much darker. But what she didn't know, I had something she didn't expect, something that would turn the tables in ways she couldn't foresee. And that, I realized, was exactly what scared her. Karen Higgins wasn't just any neighbor. She was the undisputed queen of our small, tightly knit community, the president of the Homeowners Association, HOA, with a stranglehold on every rule and regulation. She held her title like a badge of honor, constantly reminding everyone that her word was law in this neighborhood. Her yard was pristine, every blade of grass trimmed to perfection, the bushes sculpted into neat shapes. Every square inch of her property screamed control, from the manicured lawn to the exact placement of her garden gnomes. But Karen's obsession with perfection went beyond her property lines. She was controlling, cold and ruthless when it came to keeping the neighborhood in check. She had a sharp eye for spotting anything that didn't conform to her vision of order. It wasn't just about aesthetics, it was about power. In Karen's mind, everyone needed to follow her rules. Everyone except her, of course. Her ambition extended far beyond the HOA, though. While most people in the neighborhood saw her as just the uptight HOA president, I soon realized there was something much darker beneath the surface. Karen was deeply entrenched in the world of pharmaceutical deals, quietly making moves with a local drug company to supply them with cheap, locally sourced herbs for their medicine line. She had struck a deal with the company, providing them with the raw materials for their high-priced herbal treatments. And that's where I unknowingly became her biggest problem. You see, the golden seal I had planted was exactly what she needed. It was rare, highly sought after, and perfect for her business. If I kept it alive, it could disrupt her entire operation, forcing her to pay more for materials, or worse yet, find a new supplier altogether. In her eyes, I had become an obstacle that couldn't be allowed to flourish. Karen wasn't upset about the golden seal because it was non-native, as she claimed. No, her issue was much more personal. I was threatening her profits, and in Karen's world, that was unforgivable. At first, I didn't realize the extent of her greed or manipulation, but as the tension between us escalated, I began to see the truth. Karen wasn't just a petty HOA president. She was a calculating, power-hungry woman who would stop at nothing to protect her business deals, even if it meant destroying my garden and my peace of mind in the process. And now I was about to show her just how far I was willing to go to stop her. A few days after Karen's first threat, I could feel the tension in the air. It wasn't just that she wanted me to remove the golden seal. It was the way she approached everything, with such determination, with a sense of control, as if she had the power to dictate not just my yard, but my life. The first letter from the HOA was the start of a slow, methodical escalation. She had found an opening, and she was going to make sure I knew exactly how much power she held over me. The letter was formal, of course. It stated that I was in violation of HOA regulations by planting a non-native species. But what bothered me most was the phrasing, "Failure to comply with these regulations will result in further actions, including fines or legal action if necessary." I wasn't just facing some friendly reminder to follow the rules. I was being warned of dire consequences. It wasn't about a plant at all anymore. It was about her control. Karen wasn't the type to back down once she'd made up her mind. I thought the first letter was just a warning that maybe it was a one-time thing, but it wasn't. Over the next few days, the letters kept coming, each one more aggressive than the last, demanding I remove the plant or face severe penalties. I ignored them at first, figuring I could brush it off. But soon Karen began showing up at my house in person, lingering on the sidewalk just across the property line, watching me work in my garden. It was subtle at first, almost like a passing glance, but her eyes were always fixed on the golden seal patch. Then, one afternoon, as I was kneeling by my plants, I saw her approaching her heels, clicking on the pavement as she marched towards me. "Jack," she said, standing in front of me with her arms crossed, a smug look plastered on her face. "You know that plant is breaking, HOA rules, right?" I stood up, slowly, wiping the dirt off my hands and standing tall. "It's golden seal. It's a medicinal plant. It's not hurting anyone." "That's what you think," Karen replied sharply, not even letting me finish. "This isn't about what's harmless. This is about the rules. The HOA rules. And you're violating them?" I could feel my frustration bubbling up, but I kept it in check. "You've already sent me the letters. I'm not going to take it down." Her smile faltered, but she quickly recovered. "You don't understand, do you, Jack? It's not just about the plant anymore. If I wanted to, I could have the board fine you. I'm telling you now, you need to get rid of that thing. It's causing problems." "Problems?" I echoed now, genuinely confused. "It's a plant. It's not doing anything wrong." Karen's expression grew colder and her tone more condescending. "The problem is that you're the one causing trouble. You think this is about a single plant. It's not. This is about compliance. And I'll make sure the HOA takes action if you don't follow the rules." I could feel the tension in my chest tightening. "You're threatening me with the HOA over a plant." She didn't answer, but the look in her eyes said everything. She wasn't just a stickler for rules. She was pushing her weight around, making sure everyone in the neighborhood knew who was in charge. And it became clear the golden seal was only the beginning. The days after that conversation were filled with Karen showing up at odd hours, always hovering just outside my fence, her eyes never straying far from my garden. Every time I caught sight of her, she would give me that same look of judgment, as if she expected me to fold and just do what she wanted. It felt like I was being watched constantly, and the weight of her presence was wearing me down. Then one morning I came outside to find my golden seal plants had been tampered with. The leaves were damaged as though someone had taken a knife or scissors to them. My heart sank as I kneeled down examining the plants. Whoever had done this was careful not to destroy everything but to send a message. It was subtle yet unmistakable. This wasn't an accident. Someone had targeted my garden. My mind immediately went to Karen. She was the only one who had the motive, the resources, and the obsessive determination to ruin what I had built. She'd warned me, and now it seemed she was taking matters into her own hands. I didn't wait to confront her. I went straight over to her house, anger flaring in my chest. I rang the doorbell, and within seconds she opened the door, her eyes flicking briefly to the garden before returning to my face. "Did you destroy my plants?" I demanded, my voice calm but forceful. Karen's lips curled into a tight smile. "Destroy your plants? I don't know what you mean, Jack." "You know exactly what I mean," I snapped. "You've been harassing me about the golden seal, and now you've gone as far as to damage my property." She took a step back, her eyes narrowing. "I told you this would happen. If you didn't follow the rules, there would be consequences." I was done being polite. "You can't just go around sabotaging people's gardens because you don't like their plants. You're breaking the law." Karen gave a little laugh, but it was empty and bitter. "Law? This is HOA policy, Jack, and I'm in charge here. You'll regret not listening to me." I felt a chill run through me. This wasn't just a simple issue with a neighbor anymore. Karen wasn't interested in following the rules. She was interested in controlling everything around her. And she'd just made it clear that she'd stop at nothing to get what she wanted. I left her house without another word, my mind racing. Karen had crossed a line. This wasn't about the plan anymore. It was about power, control, and greed. And I wasn't going to let her win. The battle had just begun, and I wasn't backing down. The next few days were a whirlwind of tension. My garden had always been my peaceful sanctuary, but now it felt more like a battlefield. The damage to my golden seal plants wasn't just physical, it was personal. Karen had made it clear that she wouldn't stop until she had control, and now I was in her sights. I tried to shake off the feeling of paranoia as best I could, but it was impossible. Every time I stepped outside, I felt like I was being watched. The neighborhood was quiet, but not in the same comforting way it used to be. The weight of Karen's presence hung over everything. I kept expecting her to show up at any moment with her clipboard, ready to start writing another violation. Then the next escalation came when I found the second note. It was left on my doorstep, early one morning, neatly folded, its words scrawled across the paper with the same bureaucratic tone as the first letter. But this time, the tone was harsher, more personal. "This is your final warning, Jack. You are causing serious problems for the community by growing non-native plants. This isn't just about the HOA. I've reported your violation to the board, and the consequences will be severe. You have 2 days to remove the golden seal, or I will escalate this further." I could feel the anger bubbling inside me, but there was something else there too, a sense of dread. The kind of dread that comes from realizing that someone has been playing a game with you for longer than you realized. Karen wasn't just upset. She was making sure I understood that she was in control, that her version of rules were not to be questioned. It wasn't long after that when I noticed more signs of interference. I had installed a security camera to keep an eye on my garden, but one morning as I watched the footage, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Karen. She was standing at the edge of my property, leaning over the fence and staring at my plants. She was so close, her fingers almost brushed the leaves. I could see her looking around as though checking to make sure no one was watching. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a small bottle, something that looked like a pesticide sprayer. She sprayed something onto the soil of my garden, and within moments, the plants seemed to droop. It wasn't subtle. It was deliberate. I rushed outside, my heart pounding. The plants looked even worse than before. The leaves had wilted further, the once healthy greenery now discolored and shriveled. It was clear that she had poisoned my golden seal. I stood there in disbelief, the rage rising like a tidal wave. I hadn't just been fighting against someone following HOA rules. I had been fighting against someone who would stop at nothing to win. With the camera footage as evidence, I marched straight to Karen's house. My pulse was racing as I banged on her door, demanding answers. She opened it slowly, her expression one of feigned innocence. "What's the matter, Jack? Is everything okay in your garden?" "Cut the crap, Karen," I said, my voice shaking with fury. "I know what you did." Her eyes flashed, and for the first time, I saw the true malice behind her cold smile. "What are you talking about? You poisoned my plants," I spat, barely able to control my anger. "I've got you on camera. I saw you do it." She stepped back, her posture stiffening as she realized the gravity of the situation. "I have no idea what you're talking about," she said, her voice quieter, but still dripping with venom. "This is your fault, Jack. You're the one making a scene, breaking the rules." "I didn't break any rules," I retorted, seething with frustration. "You're the one who's causing trouble, and now you've destroyed something I've worked for. You're not getting away with this." Her eyes narrowed, and she straightened up, crossing her arms as she faced me. "You think this is the end? You're wrong. You'll regret this." I could feel the weight of her words, but something in me snapped. "I'm not backing down," I said firmly. "You want to fight, you got one. But don't think for a second you're going to scare me into giving up my garden." The tension between us crackled in the air like static. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then, Karen spoke again, her voice colder than before. "You don't know what you're messing with, Jack. You've made a very big mistake." I could feel the shift in the atmosphere. There was something far more sinister than a simple garden dispute going on here, and I was standing right in the middle of it. As I turned to leave, I knew this wasn't just about a few plants anymore. Karen had made her move, and now I had to make mine. But there was one thing she didn't realize: I was done letting her push me around. If she wanted a fight, she was about to get more than she bargained for. I spent the next few days stewing in anger, trying to figure out my next move. Karen had crossed a line, but it wasn't just about her vandalizing my plants anymore, it was about the bigger picture. Why would she go this far to destroy a simple garden? What was so important about the golden seal? The more I thought about it, the more it didn't add up. Golden seal was just a rare herb, but its medicinal value was significant, especially for those in the pharmaceutical industry. And that's when it hit me. Karen wasn't just some overbearing neighbor. She wasn't simply enforcing HOA rules. There was something much more sinister at play. I started doing some research, digging into the local herbal supply market and Karen's ties to the community. After several hours of combing through old articles, I stumbled across something that made my blood run cold. Karen had a relationship with a pharmaceutical company that specialized in producing herbal medicines. The company had been acquiring raw, locally sourced herbs for their products. And guess who was the one supplying them? Karen. It wasn't just my golden seal plant that was a problem for her, it was all the rare, high-value herbs she had cornered in the neighborhood. And golden seal, as it turned out, was the jewel of them all. It was a rare commodity in the world of herbal medicine, and the company Karen was working with was desperate to get their hands on it, but only at a low cost. Karen had been quietly working with this pharmaceutical company to source cheap herbs from the homes of unsuspecting residents. She had used her position in the HOA to intimidate and coerce people into giving up their plants, sometimes even making them sign agreements without fully understanding what they were agreeing to. She was undercutting prices for the pharmaceutical company and profiting from it all, while keeping her hands clean by hiding behind the HOA's regulations. The pieces finally came together. Karen wasn't just trying to force me to follow HOA rules, she was trying to eliminate any competition in her supply chain. Golden seal wasn't just a plant in her eyes, it was a threat to her financial success. If I continued growing it, I was disrupting her entire business model. She needed that plant gone no matter what it took. But I wasn't about to let her get away with it. With this new knowledge in hand, I began gathering evidence. I knew I had to act fast. If I didn't expose her soon, Karen would continue using her position to exploit the neighborhood, all while making a tidy profit off the backs of the people she claimed to be protecting. I started by looking into the pharmaceutical company she was working with. It didn't take long to uncover that they had been sourcing herbs from local growers for years, but they had been hiding their true intentions, paying next to nothing for valuable medicinal plants and selling the products for hundreds of dollars. I wasn't just going to stop at the golden seal. I was going to expose Karen for everything she was doing. I contacted a few neighbors who had previously been too afraid to speak up. After I shared my findings, they agreed to help me. Together, we started compiling evidence letters, contracts, even testimonies from residents who had been intimidated into giving up their plants for a fraction of their value. But as I dug deeper, I realized how far Karen's reach went. She had used her power as HOA president to manipulate every step of the process. She had successfully controlled the narrative within the neighborhood, turning the residents against each other while lining her own pockets. This wasn't just a petty neighborly dispute, it was a full-blown conspiracy. I had the proof. I had the documents, the contracts, the emails between Karen and the pharmaceutical company, but now I needed to expose her. And I had a plan. I wasn't going to go to the HOA first. I knew that would be a waste of time. No, I was going straight to the community. Karen had built her empire by hiding in the shadows, manipulating everyone around her. It was time to bring everything into the light. I reached out to a local journalist who specialized in uncovering corruption. I showed him the evidence, and he was shocked by what he saw. He agreed to help me expose Karen, but we needed to make sure the community understood what was really going on. We arranged a meeting. It wasn't going to be an easy fight, but I knew it was the only way to stop Karen. And as I prepared to present everything to the neighborhood, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. The truth was finally going to come out. Karen had no idea what was coming for her, and I was ready to see her fall. The morning after I reached out to the journalist, everything changed. I felt like the ground beneath me had shifted. The weight of everything I had uncovered, the danger I was about to face, hit me all at once. Karen had played her hand, but now it was time for me to play mine. I wasn't just going to take her down in front of the neighborhood. I was going to make sure her actions caught up with her in the legal world, too. I took a deep breath as I sat down at my kitchen table, organizing the evidence I had collected. I had the contracts, the emails, and the testimonies from neighbors. I even had video footage of Karen secretly discussing her deals with the pharmaceutical company. This wasn't just a garden dispute anymore, it was a business conspiracy, one that threatened the entire community. The decision to call the police wasn't easy. I knew Karen had deep ties in the neighborhood, and with her influence the authorities could be hesitant to take action. But after everything she'd done, I couldn't stand by and let her get away with it. I called the local precinct trying to stay calm. I explained everything to the officer on the line, the sabotage of my plants, the illegal agreements, and the manipulation of the HOA for financial gain. When the officer arrived at my door later that day, I was prepared to hand over the evidence, but I wasn't sure what kind of reception I would get. "Hello, Jack," the officer said, walking up to my porch. I recognized him, Officer Miller. He was a big guy with a tired look in his eyes, someone who had seen it all. He'd patrolled this neighborhood for years, and he had always been pretty neutral when it came to HOA disputes. But this time felt different. "I'm here about the report you filed," Officer Miller continued, glancing at the stack of paperwork I had placed on the table. "I've looked over the preliminary details, but you're telling me this is more than just some gardening issue," I nodded. "It's not just a dispute over plants, Miller. This is a much bigger problem than that. Karen Higgins is running a scam with the pharmaceutical company. She's been exploiting the HOA to source rare plants for next to nothing and selling them to this company. I've got the proof." I handed him the file, watching his face as he sifted through the documents. His brow furrowed as he examined the contracts and emails. "This is a lot of information, Jack," he said slowly, not looking up from the papers. "But this is a tight spot. Karen's well established around here. She's got her connections." "I know she does," I said, leaning forward. "But this isn't just about her connections anymore. It's about the harm she's caused to everyone in this neighborhood. People are afraid to speak up because of her, but she's been exploiting them for years. If we don't do something now, she'll keep doing this and worse. This is fraud, Miller. We can't let her get away with it." The room was quiet for a moment as Officer Miller absorbed what I had said. He sighed, glancing out the window before finally looking at me. "All right, Jack. We'll take this seriously. But we'll need more than just your word. You've got the proof, but we need to make sure everything checks out." I'm going to need you to come down to the station and file a full report. Then I'll see if I can push this forward." I nodded, feeling a rush of adrenaline. The moment of truth had arrived. Karen's grip on the neighborhood was slipping, and now it was up to me to ensure she would face the consequences. The next few hours felt like a blur as I met with Miller at the station, went over everything again, and made sure all the pieces were in place. After I submitted the report, Miller promised he'd take it to the higher-ups and push for a formal investigation. As I walked out of the station, my mind raced with everything that could still go wrong. Karen had powerful friends, and I knew she wouldn't go down without a fight. But something had shifted. I wasn't just the guy with a garden anymore. I was someone who had the truth on his side. The moment I realized Karen had no intention of stopping, I knew the next step. This wasn't going to be just a battle over the golden seal anymore. It was a fight for everything that mattered: my home, my neighborhood, and the truth. She had made it personal, and now I was going to make sure everyone knew what she had been doing. I started by gathering all the evidence I had. The contracts, the emails, the footage of her covert meetings with the pharmaceutical company, and even the testimonies of those who had been manipulated by her. With everything in hand, I began working with the journalist I'd contacted earlier. He'd been following the story and was eager to help me expose Karen, but we needed to make sure we were ready to hit her hard, publicly and legally. It was time to take action. The next HOA meeting was scheduled for the following week, and I knew this was the moment to strike. I didn't want Karen to control the narrative any longer. I arranged to have the local newspaper cover the meeting and set up a time for the community to hear the truth. The day of the meeting I was a bundle of nerves, but I knew this was the only way to take back control. I arrived early, my files in hand, and took my seat in the back of the room, ready for the battle ahead. Karen, of course, was already there, perched at the front of the room with her usual smug expression. As always, she acted like she owned the place, scanning the room with that calculating gaze, probably already plotting her next move. When the meeting began, Karen wasted no time. She immediately brought up the golden seal issue, framing it as a violation of the community's integrity. She was careful to play the part of the concerned neighbor, but the tension in her voice was unmistakable. "We have clear rules in place to protect this neighborhood," she began, "and it's important that everyone follows them, especially when it comes to non-native plants that could damage our ecosystem." She was talking to the room, but I knew she was really speaking to me. I stood up, my heart pounding in my chest, but my voice steady. "Karen, you've been manipulating the HOA for your own financial gain. You've been taking advantage of your position to supply the pharmaceutical company with cheap herbs, including the golden seal plant you've been trying to destroy." The room went dead silent. Karen's face went pale, but she quickly regained her composure, crossing her arms defensively. "That's ridiculous," she said, her voice faltering slightly. "This is a community issue, and I'm just trying to make sure everyone is following the rules." I didn't back down. "You don't care about the rules? You're using the HOA to manipulate the neighborhood for profit. You've been working with the pharmaceutical company to buy herbs from people in this community for next to nothing, and I have the evidence to prove it." I pulled out the stack of papers and started laying them on the table in front of me. The room began to murmur, everyone watching, as I revealed the contracts, the emails, and the photos of her meeting with representatives from the pharmaceutical company. I could feel Karen's eyes on me, but I wasn't looking at her anymore. I was focused on the people in the room, watching as their expressions turned from confusion to disbelief. I clicked on my phone and connected it to the projector. The room fell silent again as the video footage of Karen secretly meeting with the pharmaceutical reps flashed across the screen. It was her in her usual condescending way, negotiating for cheap herbs from the very people she had been intimidating into giving up their plants. "This is what Karen has been doing behind your backs," I said, my voice unwavering. "She's been using her power to control us, to profit from us while we all sit here in silence. It's time to stop letting her get away with it." Karen's face flushed red. She stood up quickly, her hands shaking with rage. "This is slander," she screamed, her voice cracking. "You have no right to accuse me of these things." But the damage was done. The people in the room were no longer looking at me with suspicion. They were looking at Karen with distrust, their eyes wide with shock at what had been uncovered. The HOA board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, and for the first time, I saw doubt in Karen's eyes. "Ma'am, please," one of the board members said, addressing Karen in a calm voice. "We need to take a step back and look at the evidence. This is serious." Karen's mask cracked. "This is absurd," she shouted, her voice trembling with fury. "You can't let him do this. This is my neighborhood." "Not anymore," I said, my voice cutting through her outburst. "Not when you've been exploiting the people who live here. You're done." The meeting erupted into chaos. Karen tried to speak over everyone, but it was clear she had lost the room. The board called for an immediate vote to remove her from her position as HOA president. The results were swift and decisive. Karen was ousted from the HOA, and all her connections with the pharmaceutical company were severed. But Karen didn't leave quietly. As she was escorted out of the room, she shot me one last glare, a look full of venom and hate. "You'll regret this," she hissed, her voice low but menacing. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The battle was over. The tension in the room was palpable. As I stepped forward, the room fell into an uneasy silence. The crowd of HOA members, residents, and neighbors had all gathered, their eyes glued to me. Karen, who was standing near the front of the room with her arms crossed, shot me a look that was a mix of fury and disbelief. The same look she had given me countless times before, but this time I wasn't backing down. "You're out of options, Karen," I said, my voice steady but forceful. "The truth is finally out, and now you'll have to face the consequences." Her face flushed with rage. "You think this is over, Jack? You think you can just ruin my life like this? This neighborhood is mine." Her words were filled with venom, but there was something else: fear. Karen had always been in control, always had the upper hand, and now that was slipping away. The board members exchanged uneasy glances, clearly unsure of what to do next. One of them, a man I barely recognized, cleared his throat and stepped forward. "We're going to have to address this situation properly. We'll need to review all the evidence, but what we've seen here is disturbing." Karen's smug confidence was gone. The years of manipulation, the secret deals with the pharmaceutical company, the intimidation, all of it was coming to light in front of everyone she had worked so hard to control. The HOA board, her power base, was starting to crumble beneath her feet. "You can't do this," Karen hissed, but her words lacked the power they once had. "I run this place. This is my neighborhood. That's where you're wrong," I said, my voice rising. "This isn't your neighborhood, Karen. It never was. You've used your position to manipulate and control people for too long. And now, it stops." I turned to the gathered neighbors, who were now murmuring amongst themselves, their faces a mixture of shock, confusion, and realization. I could see the disgust in their eyes as they began to understand how Karen had manipulated them for so long. "Karen used the HOA to exploit us," I continued, now addressing everyone in the room. "She's been taking advantage of her position to profit from rare herbs and plants in our gardens, selling them to a pharmaceutical company. And she's been intimidating people into complying, threatening fines and legal action for things that don't even make sense." I pulled out the video footage from my phone. The image of Karen negotiating with the pharmaceutical reps flashed onto the screen, and gasps erupted around the room. I heard a few murmurs of disbelief, followed by the sounds of people shifting in their seats. No one had expected this. I could see Karen's face turn white as she realized the full extent of the exposure. "This is slander," she screamed, trying to recover, but the evidence was already overwhelming. "You have no right to do this. You can't prove anything." "I don't need to prove anything," I said, my voice calm but unwavering. "It's all right here, in black and white. You've been using your power to control this neighborhood for your own benefit. And now the truth is out." At that moment, the room erupted in noise. The members of the HOA were speaking in hushed tones, while others were angrily shaking their heads. Some were even standing, pointing fingers at Karen as they processed what was happening. And Karen, she was standing there stunned, her confidence shattered. She tried to speak, but her words came out in a jumble. "You can't do this. You can't destroy me," she shouted, but no one was listening. The air in the room thickened as the evidence piled up. With every document I presented, Karen's confidence faltered more and more. Her usual icy composure melted away, replaced by an obvious sense of panic. The neighborhood had been under her thumb for so long, but now she was trapped. There was no more hiding. The game was over, and Karen knew it. I pulled out the final piece of evidence, a signed contract between Karen and the pharmaceutical company. The contract was explicit. Quantities of rare herbs were being supplied directly from local gardens, and golden seal was listed as one of the most significant ingredients they were acquiring. "Here it is," I said, holding the contract up for all to see. "This is the proof that Karen has been using her position as HOA president to source cheap, valuable herbs from people in this community. Golden seal is just the tip of the iceberg." The murmurs grew louder as people started to process the depth of the betrayal. The very thing Karen had been fighting so hard against, my golden seal, was now exposed as the key to her operation. I turned to Karen, my eyes locked onto hers. "You've been exploiting the neighborhood for years. Karen, you've been bullying residents into selling their plants to you for pennies, while you and your pharmaceutical friends make millions. And it's not just about the plants. You've been profiting off our ignorance. You've been turning our homes, our yards, into your personal supply chain. her face twisted in disbelief and rage. "This is a lie," she snapped, but there was no conviction in her voice anymore. The fear behind her words was palpable. "You can't just come in here and destroy my life, Jack. This is slander." "No," I said, shaking my head. "What slander is the way you've manipulated all of us. You thought you could control this whole neighborhood, turn us all into pawns for your profits, but you were wrong. You won't control anyone anymore." Karen's breathing grew more shallow, and I could see her deflecting, trying to find something, anything, to hold on to. But it was too late. The truth was out. The weight of her lies was finally crashing down on her. I wasn't finished, though. This was the moment I had been waiting for. I turned to the crowd, who were now wide-eyed, their attention fully focused on the evidence unfolding before them. "Karen's not just guilty of making money off us," I continued. "She's also put our entire community at risk. Think about it. If we had continued to turn a blind eye to this, how much more would she have gotten away with, and for what, to line her pockets while we sat here in the dark?" The HOA board members exchanged nervous glances now, looking at Karen not with respect but with suspicion. One of them, an older man who had been a silent participant until now, stood up. This is serious," he said, his voice wavering. "We have to do something. We can't just let this go. The board needs to address this immediately." I didn't let up. "Exactly," I said, turning back to Karen. "Your reign is over. This neighborhood is waking up, and we're not going to let you use us anymore." Karen's eyes darted around, trying to gauge the room, her mind scrambling for a way out. "You don't know who you're dealing with, Jack," she hissed, her voice trembling. "This isn't over. You think you've won. You're making a big mistake. I'll make sure you regret this." "I'll shut up, Karen," I interrupted, my voice cold and final. "You've manipulated us for long enough. There's nothing you can do now. You're done." The room was silent for a beat, then Linda, one of the other board members, cleared her throat and stepped forward. "We need to take a vote," she said firmly, her voice gaining confidence. "This is beyond HOA rules. This is a matter for the authorities." The tension in the room was unbearable, and even Karen couldn't deny that the end was near. As the board began the vote to remove her from her position, Karen stood there stiff and defeated, her facade crumbling. She had no more tricks up her sleeve. The community had turned against her, and she was about to lose everything. The board members voted quickly. The result was unanimous. Karen Higgins was officially removed from her position as HOA president, and she was expelled from the HOA. The evidence of her illegal dealings with the pharmaceutical company was too damning to ignore, and her influence over the neighborhood was officially over. For the first time, in what felt like years, the room exhaled. Karen, who had once held so much power over us, was now the one being escorted out, her head down, her shoulders slumped in defeat. She was done, and so were her plans. But as she left the room, I could feel the weight of her hatred still lingering in the air. She wasn't finished fighting, and I knew that somehow she would try to find a way back into the game. But for now, we had won. The neighborhood was free, the truth had been exposed, and there was no turning back. As Karen was escorted out of the room, I could feel her eyes burning into the back of my skull. But for the first time, I didn't feel the usual weight of her presence, the looming threat that had haunted me for months. She was no longer in control. The manipulative, self-righteous woman who had tried to crush everyone in her path was now nothing more than a defeated figure quietly removed from her own throne. The room remained still for a moment, a heavy silence hanging over the group. No one seemed to know what to do next. But it didn't take long before the truth began to sink in. Karen's reign was over. For years she had ruled with intimidation and fear, using the HOA and her connections to control the lives of everyone around her. But today that came crashing down in the face of the truth. Linda, the board member who had spoken up earlier, cleared her throat. "I think it's clear what needs to happen now," she said, her voice strong. "We've heard the evidence. We've seen what Karen has been doing. She's been using the HOA to profit off the community, and that's not something we can allow to continue." "Agreed," another board member added, nodding gravely. "We need to act swiftly and make sure this doesn't happen again." The others murmured in agreement, their faces a mixture of shock, anger, and disbelief. It was clear that Karen had betrayed them all. The board, which had once been under her thumb, was now free to make decisions for the good of the community. "Let's put this to a vote," Linda suggested, her voice steady. "We'll officially remove Karen from her position and dissolve any agreement she made with that pharmaceutical company. This cannot stand." The vote was swift, and it wasn't even close. Karen was officially removed from her position as HOA president, and her grip on the neighborhood was shattered. The relief in the room was palpable, like a weight had been lifted from everyone's shoulders. People who had been afraid to speak up for years now felt empowered. They were no longer afraid of her manipulative tactics, of her constant threats, of her hold on the community. The community was free. As the meeting came to a close, I could feel the adrenaline pumping through my veins. My hands were still shaking, but it wasn't from fear. It was from the exhilaration of finally standing up for what was right, of exposing Karen for the fraud she was. The residents began to gather in small groups, talking amongst themselves. The murmurs of disbelief turned into discussions about how to move forward. Some people approached me to thank me for standing up to Karen, for showing them that they didn't have to live in fear of the HOA anymore. I wasn't sure what to say to them. I had only been trying to protect my garden at first, but in the end, I had ended up fighting for something bigger. I'd taken down a corrupt system, and in the process, I had helped free a community from the clutches of someone who had used fear and manipulation to get ahead. But even as I stood there, surrounded by grateful neighbors, I knew that the battle wasn't completely over. Karen was already plotting her next move. I could see it in her eyes, the hatred, the venomous glares. She was going to try to get back at me. I knew it wouldn't be the last time I'd have to face her. For now, though, I could breathe a little easier. The fight was over for the moment. But as I glanced over at the vacant chair where Karen had once sat, I couldn't help but feel a sense of finality. She had underestimated the power of the truth, and now it was her turn to face the consequences. And as I left the meeting, walking out into the bright afternoon sunlight, I realized that the neighborhood had finally taken back control. The air felt different, lighter. The days of living in fear under Karen's watchful eye were over. I hadn't just protected my garden, I had protected the community. And that made every step, every bit of effort worth it. The neighborhood was free, and that was a victory I would always remember. The days that followed Karen's removal from the HOA were filled with a strange calm. It was like a weight had been lifted from everyone's shoulders. The residents who had once kept to themselves, afraid of crossing Karen, now greeted each other with more warmth. Conversations that used to happen in whispers now occurred openly. It was as if the entire neighborhood had woken up from a long, oppressive slumber. Karen's house remained quiet for days. No more meetings in the front yard, no more snide remarks. The only sound that echoed from her property was the hum of a moving truck, one that arrived a few days after the meeting. She was gone. Gone from her position, gone from the community. Her influence was shattered, her plans destroyed. The neighborhood had reclaimed its power. As for me, I spent my days tending to my garden. My golden seal plants were thriving, healthier than ever. But it wasn't just the plants that had flourished. The entire neighborhood had in its own way been reborn. The fear that once haunted every corner had dissipated. I had stood up to the system, and now there was nothing left to fear. It didn't take long for the impact of Karen's removal to spread beyond the HOA. The local media caught wind of the story, and the small neighborhood dispute became something much larger. A few articles in the local paper, a couple of interviews with the residents who had stood by me, and the story was out for everyone to see. The pharmaceutical company that Karen had worked with quickly issued a statement, cutting ties with her entirely. They had already felt the sting of public backlash after the truth came out. As for the HOA, the bylaws began to change. A vote was called to ensure that something like this would never happen again. No one could hold the position of president with a vested interest in external business dealings, especially ones that exploited the residents. New bylaws were written to protect the integrity of the neighborhood, and transparency became the new rule. The residents were no longer passive. They had become active participants in the decisions that affected their homes and lives. I watched all of this unfold from my porch, where Barnaby lay at my feet, content as ever. I felt the change, the new energy in the air. The neighborhood was stronger now. It had learned the hard way, but it had learned. One afternoon, a few weeks after the meeting, I found myself sitting on the porch, sipping coffee and enjoying the cool breeze. The neighborhood was peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos of the past. Karen's house was still silent, the for sale sign in the yard, a reminder of what had happened. But even as I enjoyed the serenity, there was a part of me that couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't truly over. And then, just as I was about to head inside, I saw a familiar face walking toward me. It was Steve, the mailman. He had been a part of this whole story, unknowingly playing his part in the final blow to Karen's control. He waved as he approached, and I waved back. "You're looking good, Jack," Steve said, leaning against the mailbox. "Things are finally calming down around here, huh?" I nodded. "Yeah, it feels like the neighborhood is finally free." Steve chuckled. "Well, funny thing, I've got a letter here for you." He pulled out a manila envelope from his bag and handed it to me. "It's from the local council." I took the envelope a bit confused. I hadn't expected anything from the council, but when I opened it, my heart skipped a beat. It was an official notice stating that I was being recognized for my efforts in exposing the corruption within the HOA and for standing up for the neighborhood. It was an unexpected reward, but a welcome one. As I looked at the letter, I couldn't help but smile. Maybe this was my moment of closure. Maybe it wasn't just about fighting for my garden or exposing Karen, it was about fighting for something greater than myself. It was about protecting the community. Guess this is how it ends, huh? Steve said, grinning. You standing tall, and Karen, well, she's history. I chuckled, shaking my head. Yeah, I guess it is. As I stood there holding the letter, I felt the weight of everything finally lift off my shoulders. The fight had been long, and the battle had been fierce, but in the end, we had won. The neighborhood had reclaimed its power, and I had stood up for what was right. And as the sun set behind me, casting a golden glow over the front yard, I knew that no matter what happened next, this would always be a victory worth remembering. Looking back, the win wasn't what mattered most. It wasn't about defeating Karen, or even about standing my ground in the face of intimidation. What truly made a difference was that I chose to handle the situation the right way from the beginning. The legal process, evidence, and following through with the right steps all led to the resolution. Without them, things would have ended very differently. Standing up legally is a far cry from reacting out of anger. The urge to confront, to lash out, can be strong. But I knew that losing control would have only made things worse. Instead, I focused on gathering the facts, staying grounded, and letting the process work for me. The calm approach, not the rage, was what brought me victory. For anyone facing a similar situation, my advice is simple: keep records, stay informed, and know when it's time to get professional help. Navigating conflicts legally may feel slow at times, but it's the most reliable route to making lasting change. Don't rush to take matters into your own hands. In the end, it's the respect for the law that holds a community together. The HOA's power only lasted because it went unchecked, but now with the truth out there, things are different. As I stood by my garden, with the golden seal growing strong, I knew that standing firm in the right way was worth every moment.